Hi, so I wanted to record this vlog. This is the post Madison Square Garden vlog, and so I guess I should introduce myself since this is it's not my first vlog, but it's definitely the first one of this new format. I've been doing podcasting for a couple months, and I want to get back into video. So hi, I'm Weldon. I'm a sports psychologist, and I've been working with some teams on and off throughout the last few months, some in Europe, in the European LCS, some in the North American LCS, most notably CounterLogic Gaming. And since they just won the North American Finals, I wanted to take an opportunity to make a vlog and talk a little bit about the experience. So I'm going to be referring to my notes, which is why sometimes I'll break eye contact with you guys. I'm not quite as good at this as Thorin is, or somebody who has everything memorized. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to talk about what is sports psychology, because I think that will help clarify kind of what goes into the work that I do. And uh, so my background is actually as a swimming coach. I used to be a professional swimming coach, and I moved into coaching the mental aspect of sport when I went and got my degree in sports psychology. And since then, I've really come to understand that there really is no divorce between the physical, the physiological, and the mental aspects of sport. Like everything that you do involves your brain, and everything that you do involves your body. Even if you look at a sport like esport, you see that you have muscle reflexes combined with executive decision making. You have to train in the day, when you wake up, and you have motivation, and you have communication and social dynamics, and everything is completely intertwined. So there's really no separation between mental performance and physical performance in pretty much any sport, but especially in esport, which so emphasizes the mental aspect of the game. And so the role of a sports psychologist is really one of the functioning members on, like you'd imagine, a Formula One crew. Like you could just have a single guy changing all the tires on a NASCAR car or on a Formula One car, but you don't. You have one person in charge of the wrench, and one person in charge of the tire, and another person filling the gas tank. And so you take a whole team for these pit stops, and you don't have just one mechanic working on the engine, you have a team of mechanics. So at the elite levels of sport, it makes sense to have a diverse team working with athletes, each that can bring their own strengths to the field. And so as a sports psychologist, what I really focus on is helping players realize that they don't need to avoid pain, avoid discomfort, and avoid things like nervousness, but rather that these are things to be leaned into and kind of attacked and aggressed upon and expected, because these aren't things that you can really control. You can't control like walking on stage and having your adrenaline pump up and your heart get excited. Like that's going to happen, especially if you walk on stage at Madison Square Garden. But you can walk on stage and have your heart pump up and your adrenaline spike, and you can either be afraid of that and have it control you, or you can accept it and lean into that, encounter that experience, and use it to fuel you towards excellence. So that's something that we've been working on, not just in competition, but in a daily way. There's all sorts of discomforts that you have to deal with in training, from getting up to like queuing up with a hero that you don't want to play, to running a drill that you don't want to drill, to listening to the advice of somebody that you don't necessarily like. And all of these things involve like discomfort and acceptance of that mental state. And apologies for the angle, like I don't have a nice table, so I just have a laptop here, but I'll do my best. Um, by the way, this is Finland, where I live, behind me in the woods. I'm an American, but I live in Finland, and this is kind of why. It's just gorgeous here. So the second thing I work on with teams is mental toughness, and mental toughness just takes the form of choosing to act in the service of your values instead of your urges and internal states. So let's say you want to eat an ice cream, but then you don't because you are on a diet. That's mental toughness. Let's say that your teammate pisses you off and you want to punch him, but you don't. Instead, you say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. That's mental toughness. So anytime you have like a desire to do something like sit there and browse Reddit, and instead you go to the gym and lift weights, or you swim 100 meters, or you train a champion you don't like and lose the game, that's mental toughness. And so everybody is at a different place on their journey to mental toughness. And the way that I practice sports psychology is to just kind of help them along that journey, act as a guide, help them reflect on what it is this week they're challenging with, and where they can level up, next level their thinking or their actions. And the third thing that I really work on is with the coaching staff, training the right way. So like research-based, scientific-based training. Like I said before, there's really nothing that is not mental in sport. Like when you have an expert level motor reflex, that is something that's in your brain. You have neurons that you have wired up a certain way to do the shot in a certain way so that you have a fading jumper. It's something that you've practiced specifically. And you might notice that there are people who can play 5 hours or practice 5 hours of a game or a sport and not improve. And there are people that can practice 5 hours of a sport and they will improve greatly. This is a mental difference. Okay, it doesn't have to do with talent or genetics. It has to do with your concentration and your ability to focus and criticize yourself, your vulnerability. And so there are ways to coach and train people that accelerate learning, and there are ways to coach and train people that lead to the development of bad habits, to no learning at all taking place. And that's true in all sport and in all schooling and in everything. So in this way, like sports psychology is more like performance psychology, where I'm helping coaches become experts on the brain, and especially on their player's brain, so that they can try to engineer learning experiences every single day in every match that they train. So now I wanted to get to Madison Square Garden. I think that there's a quote that sums up my opinion about this encounter and what the players achieved here, and is by Theodore Roosevelt. And I'm going to read the entire quote. It's a little bit long. It was delivered in 1910 in Paris, and it was an address to a crowd. So this is what he said. "It is not the critic who counts, nor the one who points out how the strong person stumbled, or where the doer of a deed could have done better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. Who does actually strive to do deeds? Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotion, spends oneself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he or she fails, at least fails while daring greatly? Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those timid spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat." So, first and foremost, everything that any support staff has done for this team only works because of the effort and focus that occurred within the players themselves. So you could take my work and you could put it in with somebody who's not willing to go 110%, and nothing would happen. The person would sit at their desk and never win Madison Square Garden. So essentially what happened here was you have a bunch of people that were willing to sacrifice everything, were willing to suffer and put in the work and put in the effort and sacrifice, even with the chance of no victory. And because of that, they were willing to put 100% of their self on the line and be totally vulnerable with, everything that we worked on. I mean, it did some crazy things with the guys. And as you can see, there's parody videos of Blurred Limes, Chris, their coach, in the brick and whatever. He did some crazy things with them too. And they were 100% into them. They were always saying, we want to win. We'll do whatever it takes to win. And because of that, they're the ones who deserve all of the credit for the victory that was achieved. They're the ones who put themselves out there, who took all the risk, and who sacrificed all the time for this. I want to bring attention to something that Peter said on stage, Double Lift. He said, "This is the greatest day of my life." And I want to ask why that would be, if you think about it. It's not because he earned this trophy that he hoisted. It's not because he deserved it either. It's because he put the work in towards it. So when you pay for something with sacrifice, the sweetness of the reward is measured not by the reward itself and what it represents and whether or not you earned it or deserved it, but by the amount of yourself that you invested into it in hopes of achieving it. And double lift in particular is in a sport that is very unforgiving. You have to be totally vulnerable with your teammates because what they do is out of your hands. You have to trust them so completely that you're willing to say, like, I have to trust this guy even though he might lose me a trophy, because that increases our chances of winning that trophy. And that level of sacrifice is not easy to come by. It takes a lot of mastery and self-discipline, and all of the players on CLG achieved that level. And so really the credit goes to them and to the work that they put in every single day from the beginning of the split. And actually, for some of these people, it started years and years and years ago, all the way up until, you know, standing on stage there. So going into Worlds, I wanted to share a message with some of the teams, especially the ones from North America and from Europe, just about like sports psychology and the future of esport and like what kind of mentality they should have going into Worlds. So I want everybody to understand that any advantage that Korean and Chinese players have is only social. So there is not some sort of like genetic bred talent where we as humans have evolved so that some of us are better at esport and some of us are worse at esport. Um, First of all, it doesn't make sense if you know anything about natural selection. And secondly, we know from research in talent detection and sport, from years of research, decades of research, that there is no way to determine by looking at a chemical or a genetic makeup like who's going to be talented, because it comes down to the mind. It comes down to who puts in the work to achieve that level. Yes, there are some genetic limiters, like you're more likely to reach a high level in basketball if you are slightly higher. And with gymnastics, like there are some certain things that kind of like give you an edge as a young girl in gymnastics. But outside of those really niche cases, most sports, and especially keyboard-based sports that just revolve around reflexes, which don't really decay until you're in your 30s and 40s, and even then come back with training. Like these things are not genetic limiters in any way. It has to do with mental focus and with training. So train smart, train hard, train with full focus, and lean into the discomfort. Don't shy away from waking up in the morning and being like, okay, uh, what am I doing right now? What am I sacrificing for? And what can I tolerate in service of that? From my teammates and from my coaches, what am I being asked to do? What am I not? What am I limiting myself with? What am I like saying like I cannot tolerate that? I cannot accept that. Is that really true? Is it something that maybe you can actually lean into that discomfort and say I can tolerate this because I value the result of my actions greater than I care about the temporary discomfort I'm going to suffer here, in this like 3 hour block of training where we're losing the game and I just want to quit, or goof off or just like relax a little bit. But if I focused instead, it would feel like work. It would feel like uh, frustration, but I would still learn and gain from that. So lean into the discomfort, and I want to draw attention to the fact that like when you go on stage in these huge arenas, um, there is no right or wrong way to feel internally. There's no right or wrong way to feel when you wake up and when you're dealing with teammates. Like if you hate a teammate or something like that because of something they said, like that's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing either. Because what really matters is the actions that you take as a result of that internal state. So the coward and the hero in the stories, like they feel the same thing inside when they walk on stage. They both feel the same thing when they wake up in the morning. They're both humans, so all of these emotions like shame, uh, bravery, excitement, fear, they all happen pretty much in equal amounts in us. Fear that you're insufficient to the task, you know. But the difference is the coward finds ways of avoiding and protecting himself. Whether you practice perfectionism and hold it up as a shield, like, oh, I have to be perfect so that I have no, so that I can like hold that up as a shield and say like, well, it was my perfect, so that was all that I could give. Or whether it's procrastination or excuses. Whereas the hero strives for excellence. So they act in service of their values rather than their urges and their I guess I want to say desires, but I don't mean desires like the things that you want. I mean desires like the momentary urges that you get, like the desire to hop open, hop on Twitter in the middle of Champion Select or whatever it is that's distracting you from focusing on training, those kind of things. So don't worry so much about like feeling right and trying to control your choking in terms of like internal states and nerves. Focus more on controlling your actions and your use the motivations that you have in your life, the things that are driving you and the values to determine your course, on a daily basis. And all of that work will pay off when you get on stage. That's the other thing. Like, don't be the cram student who goes the last week and says, okay, now I need to train hard and try to get up on stage. Like, trust in the labor of weeks and weeks of practice. And when you get on stage, like, agree that that is like sufficient, that what you brought to the table is what you can strive with. And so, like, really make sure that you kind of lean into, I keep saying this over and over again, but when you get on stage, um, just trust in yourself and trust in your teammates. And like, they're going to be sufficient to the task as much as they are able. And somebody might be better that day, but that is not like a reason not to like strive for excellence and try to beat them anyway without any sort of like blame or frustration on the part of like you and your coach and your teammates and things like that. So yeah, this is my first vlog. Sorry for rambling. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Let me know if you have any questions, by the way. You can Twitter me.